Hey programmers, welcome back to Grandma 3 for Grandma 2 programmers. I'm calling this video Programming in the Fixture Sheet, which should sound pretty redundant because all of your programming ends up in the fixture sheet. There is a lot of information in this video, but as far as I'm concerned, the fixture sheet is the most important window on the console, so I think it's worth spending some time here. Let's start by opening a new fixture sheet. First off, in Grandma 2, the options in our title bar were pretty different. I don't know about you, but one of the first things I would always turn on were fixture sort and feature sort. We still have these, they're just hiding in the Windows settings. Looks like feature sort is on, and I'll also turn on fixture sort. Obviously, any of the changes that you make in here can be stored as your selections if you save this as a view. Like, I'll almost always want a view with a version of the fixture sheet that is programmer only, and I also want to have the layer toolbar available. I'm sure that you've already noticed the layer bar built into the encoder bar, but the layer toolbar in the fixture sheet has more options like output, DMX, and QID, which I think is imperative to be able to check when you're running multiple sequences and need to see what queue is controlling what. As expected, a lot of the options in here are self-explanatory. We've already talked about adding appearances to windows in another video. If we want to tweak how our data is displayed, we can change font size or adjust columns. I like this, it makes them all fit, but I might not use this if I have a combination of lighting fixtures and media servers with a ton of attributes. And also, if I turn it on, I do lose the option to adjust the size of an individual column on the fly. There's also transpose, which I do not like, but it does what it's meant to. It sets your fixtures as columns and your attributes as rows. I'm going to go ahead and transpose those back. If I turn on merge cells, you can see how attributes with the same value or preset name, like pan and tilt, are shown with merged cells instead of the same value in both. The top row also changes how our data is presented. Layer allows me to specify a way that the data will be shown, like showing absolute values or fade and delay times, QID, etc. But since I've turned on the layer toolbar, I want to leave this as auto because I generally change these options on the fly with a toolbar on the screen. Step and readout I'm not going to change here because these options are also always available at the top of the sheet. We'll be coming back to talk about these options. The speed option's handy if you want to change from auto to specifically using BPM, hertz, or seconds. And the preset option determines how much information about a preset is shown in the sheet. The time and frame readout options will change how values in fade and delay are displayed. And this sheet mode, that's to change this from a fixture sheet to a channel sheet. Yep, they're both the same thing now, so if you like the channel sheet, don't go looking for it in the add a window option. This is how you get a channel sheet now. In this mode, you might also want to play around with a number of columns shown here. The mask options allow us to only show certain fixtures of certain ID types. You can also apply a filter from your filters pool to narrow down your information even further, or turn on the filter toolbar. When you're programming from scratch, you're definitely going to be using the encoder bar. We already talked encoder basics in the hardware video, like the difference between the inner and outer wheels. Now let's talk about how to use those encoder wheels when we want to manipulate data in the fixture sheet. The feature groups at the top still jump our encoder wheels to parameters of that feature. And when we've activated a parameter, besides it showing the red background on our encoder wheels and in our fixture sheet, the attribute type also shows with a red line indicating the active values, just like MA2. If I tap on the name of the feature, I can still deactivate or activate the values in the fixture sheet, just like MA2. We can still select fixtures and hit please twice to activate all parameters. And now is a good time to mention that the clear key still has the same 3 levels that we remember. We also still have off that we can use to remove an individual attribute or feature or fixture from the sheet. And of course, blind and freeze are also still available to us along with our program time option. When you're working with color, one thing you might be looking for among the buttons on your encoder bar might be that special dialog shortcut that would open up your color picker. I'm afraid that's not here, but you can store the color picker into your view using the Add Window option. Here's something new. Notice this link values option of either single or feature. On Grammarly 2, we only have this option for timing and effects. Here we have it for attributes as well. With single on, I can change a parameter like iris without affecting any other attributes, but if I turn feature on, then change iris, suddenly all parameters of that feature are affected. On the encoders themselves, some will have these channel function shortcuts on the left side, like this option on iris to toggle between rolling the iris open or closed and the iris strobing. Each one of these options corresponds to a tab in the calculator. Speaking of calculator, you can also use this presets button as a shortcut to a preset for that parameter if you like. The way the values are shown on your encoders can be changed with the readout option. You can toggle between showing your values in percentages, physical values, decimals, or hex. And if the readout option in your fixture sheet is set to auto, then changing this readout next to your encoder wheels will update how your fixture sheet reads as well. If you don't want that to happen, you can always set your fixture sheet to the readout option that you like and store that as part of your view. Another way we can change what we're looking at in the fixture sheet is with that layer toolbar I mentioned earlier. I want you to see an option in this bar that we didn't have in MA2, and that's this relative option. So far, we've been affecting our parameters absolutely, which is intuitively how we tend to work with our encoder wheels. If I switch my wheels to relative, then I can affect my absolute values relatively. For example, if I have a bunch of discrete values on intensity over a range of fixtures, and I change the relative value on dimmer to be -5, then my output goes down 5 points on each unit. I still see the original absolute values in the absolute layer of the fixture sheet, but if I toggle over to output, you can see the actual output levels have been affected relatively. Now let's talk about the align option in the bottom left of the encoder bar. The 4 modes of align we knew from Grammarly 2 are there, but a bit out of order. The first mode of align we see at the top actually corresponds with what we remember as the 3rd align mode in Grammarly 2. We can see this alignment happening when I work with tilt. The icon that looks like the MA2 3rd align mode is actually now the new mode that holds the value on the fixtures in the center of the selection and then aligns outward. The rest of the modes should work as you expect. There's also an align bar that I can add here on screen. It's got my 5 modes of align and then something new, transition options. These are all about how the align math is applied in each mode. Linear is the way we've always expected it to work. So let's take a look at how these spots run their alignment linearly. Take a look at how the same alignment works with slow or fast on. You get a slightly different curve. Okay, now let's try the same thing but with sine on. It's a subtle difference, but it's there. Let me oops that out. And while we're talking about oops, let's see what's new here as well. In your user profile, you can determine how much you want to be able to oops, specifically whether or not you want to be able to oops what's in your programmer, or if you want to be able to oops general stuff. And if you were looking to hold down the oops key to get your oops history, I'm afraid that's not here yet. Also, there is not yet an option to redo on an oops. And I want to really quickly hit up a bit about using timing. We can already change the fixture sheet and encoder wheels to work in fade or delay, but if you are planning to use the time key to key in these numbers, pay close attention to your command line. The new default for the time key is to set a Q time, not a fade or a delay on the parameter time. If we want to get fade or delay on our command line, we can hold down the MA key and hit time until we get to fade or delay. Alternatively, if you have a fixture selection on your command line and you hit time, the console will know that you don't mean Q time. If this is all too much work and you prefer your default for the time key to be fade and delay, then go into your user profile, find the time key target, and switch it from Q to fixture. Now when I press that time key, I automatically can choose between fade and delay. In this mode, if I wanted to get back to Q time, I would just use the keyword Q before hitting the time key and typing in a number. Two new styles of programming in the fixture sheet that sound a little similar are parts and steps, but they do two very different things. Programmer parts work a lot like part queues, which we had in the MA2, but now we have a dedicated window which makes visualizing what you're doing a little bit easier when you're creating these parts. So let's start there. I can see that I'm in part 0 here at the top of my fixture sheet. Let me open up the Programmer Parts window here. Basically, if I wanted to store a simple queue with no additional parts to it, just a whole number queue, then I would put all of my values into this part 0, which is where we start by default. If you do want to create a queue with additional parts, then here in this Programmer Parts window, you might click New Programmer Part. You can also pick New from the part dropdown at the top of the fixture sheet. Now when I activate values, they'll be held in whatever programmer part number I'm currently in. For example, maybe you want to put a position preset in part 0 and then an intensity in part 1. I can confirm which attributes are stored in each part by just toggling through them. Right now I'm toggling by just clicking each part here in the Programmer Parts window. You can also use the part option at the top of the sheet. Each part can also have a recipe, but we'll go over recipes in their own video. Now, do you have to use parts when you're programming queues in the fixture sheet? No, of course not. This is just a new way to organize your data when storing queues. We'll talk more about why you might use part queues in the sequence tutorial, and we'll also have to talk about how they get inserted when we get into presets and phasers. Another numeric option at the top of the fixture sheet is steps. It sounds a bit like parts, but steps are more about creating a basic phaser in your fixture sheet. Working with phasers really requires its own video, but I do want you to see the basic idea of these steps. Let's try something simple. Right now, I have my spots at full. Now I want to add a step where I'll change their intensity. A quick way to add a step is to use the small step bar down in the encoder bar. I'm going to click the arrow forward to get to step 2, and I'm going to set the intensity to 0. I can move between my steps in the fixture sheet either with this option in the encoder bar or by selecting a step number at the top of the fixture sheet. There's also a special step bar window that can be added, which might be easier to use if you're writing a lot of steps. You can see the values stored in each step as I toggle through. If you click this icon, you'll be selecting all of your steps, and you could place a value on an attribute that would be stored to both steps. If I stored these two steps into a queue, it will all be stored into a single queue, not like part queues. Think of these steps as more like an effect that's being stored into a queue. There's a lot more to this that we'll need to cover when we get to phasers, including these options over here for single step and sync. Like I said, for now, I just wanted you to see the basics. This was a lot of information, some review, but a lot of new stuff as well. So get comfortable with that fixture sheet because we're going to be using it a lot in the upcoming videos. See you then.